Can we just take a minute to acknowledge what a great job Caitlin has done in putting this whole thing together?
Where's Caitlin? Oh, here she is.
And also, I just found out that the wizard who makes the microphones work perfectly and the slides have ideal timing is Frank. Frank's the man in there making it all seamless. You're awesome. Well done. So thanks to them for all this work. So we thought we'd start by just telling you like who we are and why you should be interested in hearing us have a conversation with each other. So maybe you've read our bios. It tells you like that we've done cool stuff and we've led some companies and we've been product leaders. But I want to tell you about my experience meeting Laura, because I met Laura at the 2019 Women in Product Conference, which, by the way, in addition to this conference, an absolutely great conference. And she gave a talk, and just like Greg offered, like, I'll come talk to your team, I said to Laura, okay, I need you to come and give that presentation to my board of directors, because she led a conversation about navigating the teenage years, and I thought that's just exactly where we're at right now. We need you so much. And we started talking, and then she said, well, the thing that you talk about is actually the thing that I need you to come and present at my board about. And so from there, a great relationship was born. And I've admired Laura so much through the years. She was an amazing leader at Lever and helped them to navigate their downsizing. There's a wonderful article that she wrote on that. Is that on Medium? On LinkedIn?
It's LinkedIn. On
LinkedIn. A really, really excellent read about leadership, true leadership at that company. And now she's doing what I think is a really interesting social impact business, but one of those things that we talk about a lot in B2B of like the unsexy problems to solve. So she's now changing the way that we deal with debt management and helping people who are in debt. And we think, how sexy can debt management be? It's not, but B2B is full of really unsexy problems to solve. And so I'm honored to be on stage with you, Laura, because you are such a great leader of people, and you're such a great leader of especially the community organizations that you're a part of. The big one is Leading Women in Technology, and you told me earlier the URL for that, but I'm going to make you repeat it.
I will do that at the very end so that people can take a note.
There you go. Good.
So Jessica and I, as she mentioned, met at the end of a conference, and as you can tell, I immediately connected with her, and we have been friends since. We have a lot in common. Both Jessica and I have led product teams for over 20 years in a variety of companies, small companies, large companies, and in a variety of industries. And we both have primarily focused on B2B and B2B2C, and that's why we felt that we could share some more with you. But there's another thing that we have in common. Both of us are really into teaching. Jessica, as you heard, is the founder of Product Camp in San Diego, but she also is or was the instructor of the product management course of UC San Diego Extension. And I teach product management at Stanford, so we both love that. Now she's gone even a step beyond. She really is into building community on the product side. So in addition to Product Camp, she also was the one who started with the product management track of the San Diego Startup Week. So again, and to go with that, she is advising CEOs and founders on how to act as a CPO when they are still in the early stages. There was a question earlier today about, do you need to get a CPO when you're a small company? Well, probably not, but you better make sure that the founder and CEO know what they need to do. And so Jessica has been helping the startup companies with that. So.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. So part of what we want to do is be good product managers and know our audience, right? So we're going to start with a show of hands and ask everyone to raise, if your primary work experience, the bulk of your work experience in product is in B2B products, just raise your hand.
Wow.
Okay. Loads of people.
Wow.
If the bulk of your experience is in B2B2C or multi-sided marketplaces, raise your hand. It's okay to raise your hand twice. Some of people are in multiple categories. Okay, and if the bulk of your experience and your comfort zone is in B2C or in consumer products, show of hands. Okay, so Yeah, we've got loads of B2B, but a significant number of B2C and a significant number of consumer products-focused people. And we were just talking during the earlier break, like, there's a real difference.
There is, and I am surprised that we have so many B2B people because, as you probably know, a lot of what's written about product management, a lot of the wisdom, best practices, really have covered primarily B2C. And so all of you who are in B2B and B2B2C know that some of those best practices are much harder to apply when you're in B2B. And Jessica, in particular, one that is this quick sort of design, deliver, measure, and learn feedback loop that is so well understood in B2B, in B2C, is much harder to do in B2B because, first of all, most likely your buyers are not your users. You don't have the same number of customers, and especially if you deal with enterprise customers, you know that those customers are not going to be adopting new functionality, new innovation quickly enough. So given all that complexity, what have you done in your experience with Limelight and other of those big companies to really create that feedback loop?
Yeah, it really came into focus for me when I was at Elsevier, which is a big scientific publisher in the industry, sort of the big gorilla. Anyone who's been in science sort of, I'm sorry. And we had one time a year when we could release product. And it was during the summer holiday, and we were in big, big trouble if we made any changes that affected the user interface between that cycle, because there was an enormous rollout and documentation and training and a whole infrastructure within these research institutions to teach the scientists how to use the tools, and it was through these channels. So it first and foremost is about knowing the customer and understanding the context of use. So you, in B2B, have to more so really understand what does it take outside of our walls to get this product in the hands of our users. And that also gives an opportunity that we were able to take advantage of at Limelight Health. We had these big whale customers. It's like we only had whale customers. They were all big, strong, influential, multi-billion-dollar companies. And so because they had made an investment in rolling the product out, they were also willing to make an investment in partnering with us. So there was a different dynamic that we were able to create because we involved the customer in the innovation cycle. We couldn't do a very traditional lean startup style, learn, build, release, learn, measure, all that. We couldn't do that people do where they're like, let's release every week. A lot of consumer products can do that, and we couldn't. So we had to partner with our visionary customers. And this is really important for the product leaders to drive forward the attitude that we are not just selling to these companies, but we are actually creating a partnership with them. And I know that sometimes sales teams will sell that way, but it's up to the product team to make that real. So bringing your customers in for design sprints, bringing your customers into your innovation cycle is really the big opportunity that CPOs in particular can lead.
So it's the difference between the breadth that you can get from a ton of customers providing you feedback and a much more focused partnership and depth that you can get when you have B2B clients. Now, what is interesting, and again, we're talking here B2B, B2B2C, even on the B2C side of B2B2C, there are differences. So as Jessica mentioned, I work in the unsexy side of fintech. We are reinventing how consumers who are in debt are being treated and avoid the idea of them getting calls. But our clients are large organizations, big banks, buy now, pay laters, and they place the debts they have, and we go and try to collect from those consumers. And what we do is we reach out to them via digital channels. We provide a really user-friendly interface for them to set up payment plans that work. We provide them reminders. So we can iterate a lot more on the consumer-facing side of it. But for certain types of changes, we have a hugely important stakeholder, and it's our legal team. If you think about debt collection, and because it's been so terrible, it's highly, highly regulated. So there are certain things that we cannot just go, oh, let's try this new kind of messaging for engaging. No. Our legal team has to look at that. And for certain types of changes, we may even need to go back to our clients and say, hey, we're going to try this new thing. We're going to approach this settlement offer in this way, because some of them have to give the okay. So it's a much more complex, let's say, balance than just like, let's iterate, do A/B testing, experiment, and measure.
Yeah. And it does sometimes, when you're dealing with those big customers, get into almost the dark side of B2B, right? And we know this from really strongly sales-led organizations. I mentioned We've Got Whales. Every once in a while, you've got a customer that exerts a hugely outsized influence on your roadmap. And it becomes really problematic in the way that it can pull you off course. How have you dealt with that?
Yes. As you had mentioned, big customers who become partners are very important. And if you are in an early stage of a B2B company, you definitely want to have a couple of those key customers who help you define the product, who will be the ones who talk about your product. However, if you allow those customers to continuously tell you what they want you to do, they will essentially take over your roadmap. And I've had to deal with that across many of my companies. I have a couple of tactics that have worked well for me. One of the companies where I was leading product was a company selling the software to the largest law firms in the UK, US, Canada, and Australia. And you can all, I mean, you probably all know lawyers, right? You can imagine how each one of those large law firms felt that they were the most important client. And of course, each of them wanted to impose on us exactly what they wanted. So at some point, we couldn't accommodate everything, and we knew that some of the requests they had made no sense. So one tactic that actually worked very well was we created this customer councils, and we brought peers from law firms that respected each other, and we shared sort of the roadmap and where we were going, and we asked them in front of everybody else sort of what areas they were interested in. And it was great to see when somebody was saying, oh, we absolutely need this, and all of their peers looking at like, no, that's really not important. So essentially you got the others to tell that customer that, yeah, that thing that they were asking for wasn't that important.
But sometimes you have to take it a step further.
Yeah.
This is a tough story.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. And as a CPO, I think it is a very important thing to keep in mind. So in one of the companies when I joined, even as I was going through the interview process, I was hearing a lot of concern, primarily from engineering, that they had this huge logo customer, whale customer, that was asking for all kinds of custom development. They wanted the product to work different than the standard product. So when I joined, the first thing I did is I spent time with the product team and the engineering team, laying out in detail what were all the things that the team was working on for that specific customer, and how many of those were reusable. Well, I found that 18% of all the engineering and product bandwidth was being spent on building non-reusable things for that one customer. And so I said, well, this is not going to scale. We can't grow the company this way. So I had to go to the executive team and present this to them. And I told them, I said, I know sales is very excited that we have this logo because they feel that they can go and sell other whales. But if we land a second whale like that, we become a custom development shop. And so it was a really tough conversation amongst the executive team. And you heard Nidhi this morning. The executive team is your team. So we had to discuss what needed to be done. And after a lot of discussions, we figured out we had to part ways with that client. And the head of the business side had to go and talk to them and say, we love you dearly, but this relationship is not working, and we parted ways. So again, that is hopefully some extreme case that you don't need to do. But if you're the CPO and you see that, it's your responsibility to bring it to the attention, because the company can fail if you don't. So that's probably the one.
Absolutely. Now, there is a middle ground. So I have also had the experience of firing a customer. It feels like a rite of passage at some point. You know, you're not really in charge until you get to make really unpleasant decisions. But we found a kind of really nice middle ground at Limelight Health. So we were building software for insurance companies, and every insurance company that we serviced was a multi-billion-dollar operation. They all felt they were the most important. They all thought their stuff had to come first. And yes, of course, they did. So I couldn't fire all of them because it turns out they were all of our customers. So we had a mantra within the product development team that we were sales-led in sequencing and market-driven in scope. And what that meant was that we did allow the contracts that we closed to drive the sequence of solutions on our roadmap, but we were rigorous in the design of those solutions to meet a broader product need within the marketplace as a whole. And so that was the compromise that we found. Wasn't perfect. Michelle is in the back. She was head of my product team at Limelight, so she'll tell you probably all the ways it didn't work and how hard it was to manage. It's incredibly hard to manage. But it was the compromise that we found, and it worked pretty well for everybody. I mean, we got acquired successfully, and that's what we wanted, so I think it turned out okay.
It turned out well. Well, I know that there was just a minute ago a question about sales and dealing with sales, and so you were described how you were doing that. One of the things about dealing with sales, and again, it's a balance, right? Especially if you're in a company that's growing and there's a lot of pressure on revenue, certainly you want your sales team to be successful and be able to go and sell a lot. But you really need to watch out when the sales team is selling on futures. If you have a lot of your sales team saying, oh yeah, well, if you buy this now, I promise that we will do this, you really need to be on top of that. So in one of my companies, we were launching a new product that actually already had a lot of competitors in the market. So we had to really catch up to the competition very quickly and then surpass them in order to attract the big clients that we had to that new product. And that did require making some commitments of, okay, you are going to start using our product, we will deliver on these other things that we don't quite have. But the only way that it worked was having product really involved in those conversations and really negotiating with the sales team what they could commit and what they couldn't, because we had to deliver. And then, yeah, I mean, great, we celebrate, we got that big law firm to take this new product, but guess what? They are watching, like you promised that 3 months later you were gonna have this and this. So you need to be watching what you're able to commit or start, and again, committing only on things that you want in the product towards the future. Don't commit on things that are the one-offs that one customer wanted.
And I'll share a specific strategy. So maybe we'll try and give you some really specific things you can do to help like put this into practice tomorrow morning when you go back to the office. So part of what I did was I explained to the sales team how selling what we were actually building was going to help them be more successful as a salesperson. So I didn't get them to care about product. I showed how we cared about them as salespeople. And especially if you're doing enterprise software, these are not one and done relationships. The sales team makes their bonus on the ongoing relationship that they have over time and their ability to make real the promises in the sales cycle. So I had to open their eyes to the way that product would help them in that sales relationship to make money. And that was one of the keys to achieving that.
Good.
The other one we did on the subject of like getting sales on your side and also creating that partnership, we did a roadmap tour. So any of you who have sales teams who have copies of your roadmap slides, I encourage you to hack into all of their computers tonight and delete them immediately. Because what I instituted was a very strict policy that I presented the roadmap. Or when I got too busy, actually, Michelle presented the roadmap and did an also brilliant job of it. And what that meant, and then I was available at a moment's notice. I was never not available for a sales call to talk about the roadmap. But what that did was it made sure that I was building a relationship with that customer so that I could include them in my innovation program, and also showed how I was supporting the sales team in selling what we were actually building, which is key.
So we've talked a lot about sales as one of the big stakeholders. Of course, we talked about customers and customer success, but when you are in a complex B2B or B2B2C company, especially if you are in a regulated space, there are other stakeholders besides customer success and sales, and of course the big customers. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your experience and the need. The more complex the industry, the more complex the product, the more the pressure for you as the product leader and the product organization to be domain experts. So let's talk a bit about our experiences with having domain experts in industries that are complex.
And one of the big myths, or one of the big assumptions that's made by non-product leaders, is that a domain expert is an excellent product manager. So if you are selling to train operators, as I did at Lilly Systems up in San Jose, what you really need to do is hire some train operators to come and be your product managers because they understand the market. I think you and I have both seen that more often than not that fails. Yes. Because knowing how to ask the right questions, knowing how to set aside assumptions is one of the skills of product managers. And product management is a craft that you need to understand how to do that. Now, I will say I have had one success that was brilliant. And so Alex was an actuary, and we were building tools for actuaries. And there was something that we saw in him that actually I thought, okay, maybe this is an exception where we can get an actuary in who can help us build a product for actuaries. Now, one of our speakers earlier today said there's the thinkers and the doers and the talkers. And this is a really great example where a talker, not in a bad way, I think of them as evangelists. Mm-hmm. Subject matter experts are great for that. So if you can get an SME in as an evangelist, it is an entree to then give them all the training. So this is the other thing. If you are hiring subject matter experts or domain experts for your B2B product, you must not neglect their training in the craft of product management. I would say you have to give that to them, but what you're looking for when you hire is that innate curiosity, that willingness to set aside what they think they already know and to ask questions about how things are today or how things are that might be different from their own experience in a narrow segment of the market. So I won't say it can't be done, but there is always a lot of pressure and it is very difficult to do.
Yes, and I would say domain experts are very important to provide you a lot of information. I have examples of both, but most of the time it failed. So when I was at Intapp and we were selling to law firms, I actually hired this guy who had been a lawyer and then started working for a company that sold into law firms, and so he had started doing product stuff. And I thought, great, he is already, he's perfect. He was a disaster. In terms of product management, there was no way he could ever have kind of the thinking that we needed. And a similar thing happened with one of our consultants who had come from a large law firm. He understood the operation of a law firm. Wonderful guy. Tried to do product management, failed miserably, but we found a great position for him. He became this sort of evangelist subject matter expert. The product team could use him as really a sounding board to understand details. But he wasn't, and he became very successful in that role where he had failed miserably as a product person. Now, in another company, I was able to bring somebody who had been an expert in taxes. He had already started getting into product, and he was fabulous. And this was for a company, Topia, where we were building this very complex system to help large organizations who are relocating employees to a different place. And relocating employees, especially internationally, has a lot of tax implications. So we needed to have either an integration to a tax engine or build our own. And I had no understanding of taxes. And so he came in to run that part, and he was fabulous. So I would say you need to balance. You need to be, when you're building your team, you do need the domain expertise. But it doesn't mean that you need that as somebody who is a product manager in your team. Now, as I mentioned, we're working in debt collection, and I promise you there's nobody I could bring from the traditional debt collection industry that I would bring as a product manager to a tech company.
Oh, the problems of disruption.
Yes, yes. You cannot disrupt an industry by bringing a lot of experts from that industry to disrupt it. You need those experts to understand it, but you can't bring them into your product team to disrupt them.
Very well said. Very well said. So I think we wanted to be sure we left time for questions, and so we've got about 4 minutes, but also I think the break is after this, so if we don't get to all the questions, we're going to hang around. We'll be here. You should come talk to us during.
Right.
Yeah, so we've got.
You want to start just with the questions? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I love this question about third-party contracted engineering, so I want to jump on that one. Because love it or hate, I only get 2 choices. I hate it. I'm just going to come out and say, I hate it. And here's why. Someone mentioned earlier, I wish I could give credit, but my memory's not that good. The big thing about product management is the opportunity cost, right? And don't just think about opportunity cost for your engineers or for your product team. It's opportunity cost for your own mind share, for your space to think about things, for your product executive team, for your company executive team, for your C-suite, for your support team, for your sales team. That one-off, non-reusable engineering is a distraction and a weight that will pull down every single department in your organization. But I only got 2 choices, love it or hate it, but I want to propose an alternative.
And I think that there's 2 questions there. One is the idea of using third-party contracted engineering resources for certain things. The other one is to do this custom development work. I completely agree. Custom development work is not a one-time and you're done. You need to maintain it, and if it's part of your code, it's just going to get things very tricky. Now, we do use contracted engineering for things that are outside of the core code. For example, for integrations. If you need to do a one-off integration to an old banking system, you do want to use contractors. You don't want to use your brightest engineers for that. But that sort of lives outside of your core product. It still will need maintenance and so on. That is a good choice for those contractors.
And we do have an opportunity in the B2B space, especially depending on what sector you're in, to take advantage of the big systems integration firms or the partners in the marketplace. So to me, that's a classic build by partner decision that we need to make with every feature that we build. So make sure that you are pausing to ask yourself, should we be building this? Should we be buying it? Should we be partnering with someone? And that applies to custom development work or anything else you're building.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll take the Evan's question about the story.
Because he said you're amazing?
No, yeah. No, I'm not amazing. The story is amazing.
But you are amazing. That's okay.
So how the team came to that conclusion. The reality is that when I came in, the executive team already was aware. I mean, there was no secret that this whale was asking for all kinds of things, and the customer success team knew about it, and of course engineering was complaining about it. So they kind of knew, but they had not quantified the cost. And so it was necessary for me to really do this analysis, and we spent a lot of time looking at all the teams that were spending any time on that specific client and how much time they were spending. And once I was able to put that data in front of the executive team, then it became very clear. It's like, that's what they get. Yeah, they all in their back on their mind sort of knew this is a problem and it's not getting any better because there was no end in sight to what this client wanted. So it really worked well when once you have the data, then it's really not like my opinion that, oh, we're going to make more sales. it's like, this is the reality. And if we land another one of those whales and we use another 20% of our engineering and product bandwidth, we don't have a product anymore. So that made it a lot easier. Now, I do have to say, my CEO told me after that, it's like, you only get to fire one client. Don't try to do that again. And certainly we have others who, and so we kind of negotiate how much we need to accommodate. But yeah.
All right, well, we've got 30 seconds before Chris gives us the hook. So we're going to answer the last question. And I think this touches on part of what we've talked about is the role of a CPO, and actually Needy made me feel better about having the wrong title at my last company, because I was only a VP, but I was doing the CPO's job. And the thing that's really different about it is you're not just responsible for delivering the product. You're not even just responsible for delivering product outcomes. You're responsible for the success of the company. Yes. And when we get in that C-suite room and we're sitting around the table, everyone there is equal. It's fundamentally different relationships and conversations. I loved framing it as that's my first team is in that room. So when we're talking about adjusting incentives for the sales team, what you're really talking about is what kind of relationship do I have with my chief revenue officer or my VP of sales? Can I extend my influence to change the way that she or he manages their team? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, 100%, without question. So yes, we discounted the incentives or the commissions on things we didn't want the sales team to focus on selling, and we increased the commissions and the incentives on the things we did. That's part of our responsibility to look after very broadly the success of the company, not just our remit with the success of the product.
And that applies to the pricing and packaging. When I was at Lever, for example, we really were looking jointly with marketing and with sales, how might we repackage and reorganize so that we had different tiers, but it is tied in with the product. Like if you're going to have different tiers because there's different functionality that you offer for certain tier, you need to be able to turn on and off that functionality. You need to sort of advertise inside the product that, hey, there's this additional functionality. So a lot of that really needs to be a joint effort. There's no silo that sales or marketing decide stuff and then you're kind of responding to that.
I think that's it for us.
Yep.
But we're here for break. We're here for happy hour.
Yeah.